Hello, and welcome to another episode of Horn of Africa Weekly Conversations with my good friend and comrade, Professor Mohamed Hassan. How are you today, Mohamed? Good morning to you.
Good morning, comrade Elias. I'm okay. It's shining outside.
I feel spring is around the corner.
Indeed.
So we had a successful conference this past weekend. We're getting a lot of good feedback, positive feedback from participants near and far. Many young people who are wanting to join the youth program, for example. How was reaction and feedback from your side? What's your assessment of our conference?
It was excellent. It was very good. A lot of people, they didn't know. I'm speaking about Belgians and Dutch speakers in the Netherlands and so on, people who know me, who have watched it live and so on. They said that is good. They encouraged. Of course, this corona situation blocked everybody in their houses and so on, and it was an occasion for them to follow the program, and they really liked it, and they said it had to continue. Information is very important. One commentator, he told me, the better press in Europe, there is no information. And because of it's only the information they have, it is only one line. The television is the same. People are bored. There is no debate, serious debate. There is no analysis, and so on. In fact, they could say it is a desert became. And they say that what you are broadcasting gives more other information which we never heard, and so on. They encourage, yes.
It's good that we are filling the gap in the analysis, contextualizing the situation, going deeper, of course, exposing the propaganda. Western media is going on overdrive in terms of propaganda. So if you go by what the Western mainstream media, so-called, writes about the situation, you will be completely misinformed.
Indeed.
So we have to take up the slack and fill in the void. In that regard, I was pleasantly surprised that you appeared on the Oromia broadcast network past week. How did you find it? The English interview they did with you, 1 hour long?
It is a young man who is the English department of OBN, Oromia television.
Yeah, OBN is the television broadcasting station, Oromia Broadcast Network of the Oromia regional state, Ethiopia.
Yes.
The largest regional state, right?
Yes, he was following us in the Horn of Africa television and so on, and he contacted me and he said, I would like to make an interview with you. We are following what you people are doing in the Horn of Africa television. And then I said, okay, we can, what did you want? He said he wants to have an interview with me concerning the same situation about Tigray and the propaganda in the West against the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. And he's asking what our diplomats have to do and how we can support them and so on. So we had an interview of 1 hour, yes. He was satisfied, a lot of people.
That's good. That's good to hear. Spread the message, the analysis far and wide in the homeland. It's good that our people in Oromia are also, broadening the broadcast, the media to the international audience in English. That is important. Too often we, the peoples of Horn of Africa, tend to have that comfortable habit of talking to ourselves in our own language, and we forget of conveying our message, our stories to the outside world in international language. And so that's an important aspect. And we here at the Horn of Africa TV, of course, try to fill in that void. In other news, you also mentioned at the conference, and I did also mention how our friends in your neck of wood, as they say in your neighborhood in Brussels, Investig'Action, did a good expose on the situation analysis of the so-called massacre in Tigray and how sinister forces are preparing for this intervention under the pretext of this fabricated massacres. Tell us a little bit about that briefly. The writer, is Frans De Maegd, right?
Yes. He is a comrade.
What is the Investig'Action, for example?
Investig'Action
to begin with.
Good. The Investig'Action is created by a journalist, a very famous Belgian journalist, and his friends, Michel Collot.
Michel Collot, yes. Many Eritreans know Michel Collot, and you from that wonderful documentary film,
Indeed.
Eritrea Come and See, that you guys produced back in 2010, 10 years ago, right?
Yes. The debate was a very long time, 20 years or more than 20 years was going on, to have a progressive media outlet. And Michel was a journalist, and he was thinking in that term. And then finally, he established this Investig'Action, and I'm a member of it also. The purpose is to unmask the media. And most of the time, the media now became important. Well, it had always been important, but after 2002, preparation of before that, I think. One is that the Yugoslav War, so-called Yugoslav War.
The mid-90s, late 90s.
Yes.
Belgrade, the bombardment of...
yes, but before that, the overthrow of the government in Romania, and they showed in the television, it was on Christmas Day evening, they showed that it is the Saint Francesco is drinking of babies who are born in hospital and this, and they showed pictures. And these pictures were circulated, and it had a very big effect on the population. It was the eve of the Christmas, but it was Michel and his group and the party journalists, when they studied the picture. These are pictures, old picture. It was in a hospital where, psychiatric hospital where Romanian patients who have been died and so on. They fixed that as if they were killed by Ceausescu. So it was our journal, Solidaire, it was the first to say this is fake, this is a propaganda, this is Nazi type propaganda, Goebbels type of propaganda. Of course, in the beginning, they didn't want...
similar to what we are watching these days by digital way, yes. Photoshop, emails.
Exactly. So it is immediately they didn't respond, and then later on, when it became known more and more and more, they say it is true, it is false. It is, the objective is they have realized to steal the mind of the people for several weeks or months. Their main purpose is that this, for the moment, in the eyes of the population, and then they say, well, we have succeeded. The second is Yugoslav War.
One notorious, by the way, notorious anti-Eritrea propagandist who is infamous for such Photoshop fabrications is one by the name Martin Plaut.
Indeed.
At one time, what he did on Twitter, he took photos of demonstration in Albania.
Yes.
And he said, this is in Asmara. And the guy is notorious, logical liar.
Yes, that is what they do. So of course, also in Yugoslavia, but the latest is on Libya, because it's the whole concept was built, especially the French and the others, was built on humanitarian intervention, saying that it is the government of Colonel Mohamed Gaddafi had brought tons of Viagra. They bought from outside, and they are the soldiers, they are using the Viagra and raping the women. That was one of the major campaigns. Finally, there was no Viagra, there is nothing, it's a lie. This women raping, it is one of their major campaign position. It is very sentimental, and so on. It makes a lot of people confused, angry, and so on. They cannot see. Once you are very angry, you cannot analyze deep. That's what Goebbels says.
Emotion clouds rational thinking.
Indeed. So also Libya is the same propaganda they show
in 2011,
In 2011. So it's not different what they were doing also in Tigray. I don't think they are concerned about Tigray, but they are using that for other purposes. We can discuss about it.
So Investig'Action has been around for more than 20 years, and it publishes it in various languages, French, English, Dutch, Arabic, I understand also.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll put up that, let's put the front line, the article by Frans on the situation in Ethiopia, and we'll put the link in the description section. Very, very good, important expose. I myself, I have shared it on Twitter, and hundreds and hundreds of people have appreciated it and are retweeting it. So for our readers, it's in French, but in the website, you have an English option. If you click on the English, it will automatically translate that article for you. It's not accurate translation, but it will do for purpose. Well referenced, I must say. It was well researched. So our hats off to Frans De Maegd, who did a good job on collecting all the information, data, and analyzing and exposing point by point every lie. I mean, there's a sea of lies these days, the deluge, the flood of lies. But if we take charge seriously and present the truth bit by bit, we can make a difference in exposing these massive lies.
Yes, it is a lie.
Very important. Yeah. So having said that, this week then is a continuation of what we discussed last week about to understand what is happening in the Horn of Africa, the conflict there, the interventionism by global hegemons, especially from the West, the United States and the European Union. We did the global geopolitical perspective, the grand chessboard type of approach. And you did a good job of connecting all the dots, Eurasia. We talked a little bit about Brzezinski and the new Silk Road, what's called the Obor, how the Horn of Africa is an important gateway through the Red Sea, and the rising of China as the decline of the United States. We talked about Professor Chalmers Johnson's article, No Longer the Lone Superpower, which he wrote 15 years ago, 2005. So now, by way of updating the situation, we were concerned about the growing interventionism, this drumming up of humanitarian crisis, fabricated massacre, and what have you, and the media and the intensive propaganda against the peace. Fabrications of genocide and massacre in Tigray, which is not what is happening. So the European Union, in the past few days, I believe in March 21 or 2 or 3 days ago, came up with this weird resolution putting limited sanctions on some countries like China, Russia, North Korea, Myanmar, Burma, South Sudan, and then Eritrea is there. What do you make of this resolution? The Eritrean foreign ministry reacted to it. in a statement it issued on March 22, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from Asmara says EU's baseless and offensive resolution. I will read an excerpt for our readers. The EU has no legal or moral prerogative for its decision and has merely invoked trumped-up charges to harass Eritrea for other ulterior motives. So this is specifically targeted Eritrea's National Security Office, and it names the head, Major General Amare. It is strange, I mean, very weird. So let's talk about the ulterior motives and why is EU doing this at this particular time?
Thank you. First of all, one has to understand the European Union. What does it mean? Who is leading it? Who is paying the money for the European Union? Huge bureaucracy, which is stationed in Brussels. The European Parliament is stationed in Brussels and in France. Who's paying that? What was the purpose of the creation of this organization by itself? How is it historically evolved? First of all, before there was an European Union, there was also what they call the Common Market Association. Before that also that the Luxembourg Association, that is Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg itself. And then before that, it is 1949, the first association of the Steel and Coal Association, which United States encouraged and created this association. After
because the Cold War was emerging at that time, confrontation with the Soviet Union and the Eastern Camp.
Yes. One is that it is the most clever thinker, which later on himself, he criticized himself in his biography when he published his biography as a book, George Kennan. Kennan was the strategist of the US, and the one he wrote for everybody. I will ask to understand what's happening today and what is the European Union. One has to read what George Kennan published in 1947 in the Foreign Affairs. The US
Foreign Affairs Journal of the Council of Foreign Relations.
Council of Foreign Relations. We know that Council of Foreign Relations was created in 1921 after the Bolshevik Revolution and the intervention failed, and the bourgeoisie needed a think tank. They said we have to predict what is going to happen. We were caught without predicting, and the Soviet and the Bolshevik Revolution happened. The first think tank in the world, or in the Western world, it was 1921, Council of Foreign Relations was established. So he published there in 1947. So for every individual who can read English and so on from the whole of Africa, have to Google that and read it. It's a very important document. On the basis of that document is that the famous American linguist, Professor Noam Chomsky, he published his book in the Managua speech of him, later on it became book, Power and Ideology. So, very important document to understand what United States did after the Second World War. And that's what is also the late Professor Chalmers Johnson. I was part of it, but I rejected it. In fact, we squandered the American public money, but that's what he's saying. And we destroyed United States from within. So
the military-industrial complex took over.
The parasite segment, yes, the parasite segment. So what is happening?
But this is the policy of containment, right?
Containment, yes. That is
Kennan was advocating.
Yes, Kennan, which later on in his book, he died with his age of 102 years old. He was the first who rejected the Iraq war. He says that is a disaster. We don't have to go to war. and so on and so on. One have to read his book. He's a very clever young man. He had been a diplomat, U.S. diplomat in the 30s in the Soviet Union, and he have seen also the rise of fascism and Nazism in Europe. So he was a well-versed person. He says in that document, we have to create, he says, a sort of an alliance in Europe. We have to reject the unity of Germany, he says. 1947, no? We make sure that Germany be divided. Because the Soviet Union wanted that Germany to be united with whatever system they want, that the German issue will be solved. That is one important issue. That if Germany, and there was a big possibility that Germany could have been united after the war. There was no rejection of the Soviets against German unification, but it is the US, and he says that there in the book, in his document, canon. No. We want to divide Germany, and then contain from there the Soviet influence and the communist influence. That is one.
Containment essentially was a policy of garrisoning or encircling the Soviet Union and the Eastern European countries, and stopping the expansion of left communist socialist ideas.
Exactly. It is an ideological document also. So it is. You could see the level of the discussion. So he said he imposes that it is every country producing steel, coal alone, and no, it has to be unified. And it is this document, on the basis of this document, that organization gradually will. Then at the same time, the second important idea of Canaan is that they wanted to control European market for American firms. So the so-called Marshall Plan, it is to open European market for American firms and dominate European market. And they did it. Because Europe was shattered by the war, it was destroyed. Most of huge European economies and companies, some of them even dismantled, because it is the relationship with the Nazis and others. Even in France, there are certain big, huge agglomerate were dismantled because they were working with the Nazis. So you could see European bourgeoisie, a big European industrialist, they were working and collaborators, they were with the Nazi Germany. So they dismantled them, one, and they took over their market. This is the second point, which is a lot of people doesn't understand. The Americanization of Europe happened. And huge United States at that moment, for every 10 engineers, 6 was American. They had one of the best public schools despite the discrimination against Afro-Americans. A huge number of working class American children, including Chalmers Johnson and so on, and even Canaan to a certain extent, middle class American, they could study in the best universities and climb up from the American imperialist bureaucracy. So in a way, United States, after the Second World War, it is 60% of the GDP of the world. So they imposed on Europe. So in this way, Europe de facto, the other third important, here we have to see, the steel and the coal industry, which was called the Rome Agreement, 1949 in one side, the Marshall Plan and the opening for the American firms is the second strategy. The third is occupying Europe militarily. What does it mean? In 1947 and something, building American military bases. In Italy, they have 47 American military bases. In the name, slowly building the NATO, protecting Europe. Containment have these 3 chapters that Canaan have thought about it. Dominate Europe economically, dominate Europe militarily, pacify Europe. The third is the Marshall Plan to open the market. The fourth is Europe after the war fascism and right-wing and liberal parties were discredited totally, including the social democracy. Because the right-wing social democracy is slowly, they are the one who have brought the fascists gradually into power. And then, of course, later on, they themselves, they became a victim of that. The German Social Democrat was the strongest and so on. So United States was frightened when it says containment not only against the Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, to contain the communist and progressive elements in Western Europe. So the Italian first election, it was so frightened that American Italians have to be involved in this election, write to their families, don't vote to the communists, don't vote to this, and so on and so on. The first intervention of the CIA work is there. That is what Alan
Operation
Gladio, Alan Dallas and all these were involved on it. Second, of course, after the Second World War, when this man wrote and so on, the real architect later on after George Kennan is the Forster family. Alan Dallas and John Forster Dallas. One is
the brothers, yes.
The brothers. In the book which is called The Brothers. If anybody,
by Stephen Kinzer, good book to read.
Yes, anybody wants to read about that history, and that is the fifth or democracy, the hidden democracy.
Of course, for us in Eritrea, also John Foster Dulles and his famous speech about the necessity of having Eritrea being annexed to Ethiopia in order to suit America's geostrategic interests.
Yes.
Is that one. Of course, the first coup d'etat against Mossadegh in 1953 was also engineered by the brothers.
Yes. So the European Union, later on, from this agreement, then the local agreement developed, the Luxembourg agreement, Benelux agreements between the three small states, and it evolved into the common market. The common market continued, and the European Parliament at that moment also continued to develop between Strasbourg and Brussels. So the agreement always, Cannon says, it has to be an agreement, an alliance between Germany and France. They have to be in speaking terms. These two, they are the one who caused war in Europe. One side is German imperialism, one's expansionist policy, and the other one, French imperialism, tried to defend it.
Which started since 1870, the unification of Germany under Bismarck.
Indeed. So they have to speak, they have to come, there must be, on the basis of the alliance of these two giants. Until today is based on that.
The two pillars of the European Union then are France and Germany.
Yes. The others is they have no meaning. Britain, of course, now left. Britain joined later on the common market in 1973, 72, 73. It's from an economic term. It's not from an ideological point of view. Britain is more allied with the United States today, also at that moment. But anyway, to come, this was an economic relation by NATO, dominated by US military bases everywhere in Europe, and protecting them in the so-called with the enemy, the Warsaw Pact. The second important major development came is that the change and the collapse of the Cold War. Once this
1990, 91.
1990, yes. United States again in the cover, it pushed for European Union. And it changes the name from the common market to European Union. And then it pushed through that the expansion toward Eastern Europe, the ex-Warsaw states, the ex-Soviet ally states, the unification of Germany, which was in the beginning the Soviet one's unification of Germany, now unification of Germany, the destruction of DDR, and so on and so on. So in here, this book is important. He explains expansion. It's a double track. In one side, expansion of Europe, And another side is expansion of NATO. That
up
NATO
to the doorstep of Russia.
Up to the doorstep of Russia. Let's take one example from that. The cleverest one is Poland. Because Poland and Polish history developed a special Polish policy, which none of European countries had. Poland was one time, Poland-Lithuanian alliance in the Middle Ages and so on, it was a very big, strong state. Then finally, when Tsarist Russia came, that it is Borussia was established, then Austria and Austrian Empire was established, gradually dismantled Poland in three stages.
Once Prussia under Frederick the Great expanded,
indeed.
Poland was dismembered to Russia. And
three stages. So Poland didn't exist for 135 years. Poland.
So sometimes there's a possibility that nations can be dismembered and then come back, rise again from the ashes.
Indeed. And thanks to Lenin, that it is the right of self-determination of oppressed and so on. That is the debate sometimes between him and Rosa Luxemburg. She is also Polish. You could see from there. Anyway, Poland got independent and the right of self-determination in 1918. From this psychological point of view and historical relation, Poland developed a three-step policy how to survive in that region. When the Soviet Union collapsed and everything collapsed and so on, and United States was pushing, and of course Brzezinski himself is a Polish. Poland she wanted an ally militarily and psychologically. It is allied with the United States because of the huge number of Polish immigrants in Chicago area and so on, who are playing very important role in the U.S. policy, particularly Brzezinski and his friends. Second, Poland is frightened and doesn't want to have, they say they are in a very dangerous zone. On one side, they are afraid of Russia because of the old historical situation. On the other side, Germany, they have suffered also and German and old historical thing. They said we are sandwiched in between. So we need to have an airbag that to be safe. And that safe is that NATO is for us. Let United States come and protect us. That's why the strategical missiles they asked for it and they brought it. Third, very important policy of Polish, which makes Polish politicians very clever, they rejected Euro. Because about 1,800,000 Polish women, men and women, work as nurses in Russia. Most of Polish products, from agricultural product to industrial product, it is not sold in the imperialist countries because they consider it a second-hand production. It is sold in Russian Federation. So the Polish industrialists, the Polish intelligentsia, and a lot of families in Poland, they really eat from the dishes of Russian Federation. Therefore, they didn't want to join Euro. If they join Euro, their industry will be destroyed because their production will be very expensive, and Russian Federation will take it what she needs from other areas. So in that, they decided to say, look, we are Europe, we are NATO, but we are not Euro. Second, they didn't want to be swallowed by German imperialism. Euro is the opposite side of Deutschmark. Now, Germany and Europeans, and Germany is the one who's paying 60% of the budget of European Union.
It is the economic powerhouse.
The economic power, Union, indeed. Therefore, at this particular, not to go very far, at this particular moment, Germany is trading with whom? The biggest trade Germany has is with China. With the people.
Correct. That's why I said this EU resolution is rather bizarre. In fact, now that you mentioned it, let's bring up a quote from one European country that vehemently opposed this. The Hungarian foreign minister slams EU sanctions against Myanmar, China as pointless and harmful, he says. Hungary sees the European Union sanctions against persons and institutions in Myanmar, which is Burma and China, as pointless, self-aggrandizing and harmful, Foreign Minister Peter Ziarto said in Brussels on Monday. We'll put that up. Let's put that this headline. But yeah, there are some countries who are saying this is pointless. So why do you think countries like Germany even
that's what I'm coming. And this alliance, the so-called which was fixed between France and Germany, when you see it in concrete, in reality, after 1990, gradually German hegemonism and German architected in alliance with United States, German architect Europe was established. In 1990, I remember there was a debate, and it was our party who had invited the late professor of Egypt, Samir Amin. It was in May Day, invited here and so on, and speaking about German unification and the new European Union. You could see that the unification of Germany and the new European Union, it brought three confusion for countries, small countries like Belgium, Luxembourg, Holland, and this and this and this. They were frightened with their intelligentsia. They said Germany must be kept in a prison. We have suffered twice because of the German war. We don't want to, this is what they tell me, even professors they tell me. They say that we don't want to live for our children in misery, and then the German, we know what Germans, they have one good sport, which they know is better.
There is memories of
the past.
Two European wars from 1914 up to 1945. Yes. Essentially, actually, the two world wars
they are one.
Some historians say the one big war with a period, an interval of break of peace.
That's correct. That's correct. So what I wanted to say is that there is a fear in Europe after the 1990. What is going to happen? Secondly, is after 1990, gradually the crisis in Yugoslavia appeared with German imperialism. It was not US imperialism in the beginning pushed and destroyed Yugoslavia. It's a German expansion and so on. After DDR collapsed, all the weapons, Soviet weapons, which was in the hand of the former German democratic states, it was given to the Croat nationalists. And they used that weapon and they liberated so-called Croatia. Secondly, Germany had always an ambition to control the Adriatic Sea. And in the past, in the Second World War, the Croat fascists, the Ustaša, they were also supported by the Nazis and so on. So this link, historical link is there. As we said, the First World War is a continuation the Second World War of the first. You could see that. So they isolate the Serb, they put the Serb as if it is criminals and so on, because the Serb, they defended in the First and the Second World War. So they have to put the Serb as if it is they are Nazis, criminal, and that and this and this. Reversing, which you have said, what Michel Collot says, blaming the victim.
Inverting the victim and the aggressor, yes.
Indeed. Anyway. So there is the atmosphere was not good in that debate in Brussels. I was talking to Comrade Professor Samir Amin, the late Samir Amin. He's an Egyptian. So he was the main speaker.
A great thinker, radical political theorist of development and great analysis. He's written many books on maldevelopment, on...
Yes.
They're too numerous too.
Yeah,
too numerous. Samir Amin.
Samir Amin, the famous Samir Amin.
Yeah, greatly missed.
Yes, the debate was Samir Amin. He says he's thinking that New Europe is not different. It's repackaged again. American-dominated Europe imperialism and unipolar world. That is, for him, was very clear after what happened in Eastern Europe and the demise of the Soviet Union. But there are some European intelligentsia stood up there in the debate. They say, no, Comrade Samir Amin. This is a development, a new historical development for Europe, which means the European Union and the unification of Germany. We consider it as the unification of Germany in 1870. It is a progressive from a divided feudal small states and so on, which Bismarck brought all of them and brought one step forward in the history of Germany and Europe. So we consider also these states, which was created at one historical conditions, their validity now is redundant, and new Europe is merging as within European Union.
Yeah, exactly. Like now we are saying the new Horn of Africa.
Yes.
In the early 90s also there was thinking of new Europe. Now that the Cold War is over, there will be more development, more cooperation.
Indeed.
Then even talk from Lisbon to Vladivostok, this Eurasian kind of union.
Yes, Comrade Elias. So they went very fast and so on, Euro and this and this and this. Now in concrete, when we see it from our Horn of Africa region and from China, Burma, and all these relations.
But don't forget the question, why this foolhardy resolution against China?
I'm coming to there.
China actually now has, imposed more severe sanctions. So there's a backlash.
I think for two reasons. First, that it is our viewer in the Horn of Africa must be very prudent and understand this so-called European Union history. In fact, European Union history, it is a US engineered organization. It was only on the third stage that it changed its name. As I mentioned earlier, the Rome Agreement, then it became a common market, and now European Union. And this European Union, according to the vision of US imperialist technician like Cannon, it must be based on an alliance between Germany and France. And Germany had always, and until today, an idea in her head which is called Mitteleuropa, Middle Europe. So by the collapse of the Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact, German firms dominated Eastern Europe. And in the process, this tilted the balance of forces inside Europe, which is called European Union. So one example to give you, when Sarkozy was elected, just to give one example, he invited France and French imperialists had another to balance themselves. They developed an idea called La Méditerranée, the Mediterranean, which means it starts from Mauritania, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Israel, Cyprus, Malta, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and France herself. It's called
La Méditerranée.
La Méditerranée. So her
to counterbalance Germany's dominance of Central Europe or Eastern Europe. Yes.
So when Sarkozy he went to this is what the advisor of President Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi, told us and gave us the document, me and Michel Collomb. He says, this is the document and this is the answer. When Sarkozy is elected later on, he came, he had a discussion with us. As you know, Libya have about 1,750 kilometers.
Yeah, it's a long sea coast on the Mediterranean.
Coast. And of course, when Libyan revolution happened and so on, by that moment it is already, that is, Portugal was under the fascist, Spain was under the fascist and so on. And Gaddafi said, we want a peaceful, non-militarist Mediterranean. So French imperialism understood that if Gaddafi continues this idea, we will not succeed, let's go and talk to him. So they talked to him, they said, we wanted to create a new La Mediterranean. Then Gaddafi said, it's okay, I have no problem on that. But I am member of African Union. So you as a French government, bring a proposal to the African Union. Not only Libya will join La Mediterranean, probably the whole Africa will join. And they got very frustrated. We had, then the answer, they printed it. So the French war...
in essence, he was putting the spoke on the wheel, so to speak.
Indeed. So one of the reasons that France to be in the front line and to wage war in the name of humanitarian. So it didn't succeed to do that. And now the balance of forces in Europe, it is Germany is dominant and France is, and so on. Now to come, for France even will frighten her more what's happening in the Horn of Africa. Now we are coming to our concrete situation. The idea of a new Horn of Africa. France, Britain, United States, all, they were satisfied for the last 80 decades Horn of Africa to continue like this.
A region bedeviled by cycles of conflict, coup d'etats, national ethnic divisions, the most conflict-ridden,
indeed,
volatile part of Africa, actually.
Yes, and it is very strategical from a strategic point of view. It have a very big resources, and this region also it was seen and a stepping stone for the Middle East, further Middle East to Asia, and also deeper to Africa. So it plays...
It's a bridge between Africa and Middle East, Bab el-Mandeb, Red Sea to Suez Canal, and then Gulf of Aden to Indian Ocean, which you discussed at length in the first part.
Yes. So finally, their agent, which was controlling for them and so on and for 27 years, in 2 weeks' time, it disappeared and it was crushed.
Who is this agent exactly?
It's TPLF. Because
their favorite
house
Negro.
Yes, that it is, which was dealing with them, and in fact they could use it very easily. A minority, psychologically frightened, and so on and so on. So you can send it everywhere. In fact, in Ethiopian history, the worst agent, though there were other agents, but the worst agent coming from a minority, which is psychologically frightened.
Very insecure, narrow, frightened.
Narrow, and so on, yes.
And willing to commit any kind of brutal missions that the hegemons assigned to it.
Bravo. So, these have disappeared in 2 weeks. They didn't expect it. This is the local condition.
To use your favorite term, melted like ice cream, you say.
Yes. They didn't expect that. So it shocked them. This have a boomerang effect now, in a global and a regional point of view. In a global sense is, People's Republic of China, 98% of it are Han Chinese. And People's Republic of China have 56 nationalities. The other 55 nationalities are minority nationalities. They only constitute 2% of the country. In a geographical, on the surface basis, that it is the 55 nationalities occupy 55% geographically of China.
Such as Tibet, Xinjiang, the Uyghurs.
Yes, all these. Mm-hmm. Second, People's Republic of China, from all it is, it had only 7% suitable land for agriculture.
Only 7%. Huh?
Only 7%.
I thought it would be bigger, but
no, only
you're
7%.
right.
Now we come.
There's a lot of desert, like
yes, only 7%. That if you just check the Atlas or FAO and something, they make it clear. So now you have to see, Horn of Africa have the biggest livestock, and Africa have the biggest livestock, but Horn of Africa have the biggest also concentration of livestock. So if it is 7% agricultural base, with the modernization of China and everything, Africa and the rise of the middle class in China increasing, Africa becomes very important, extremely important for China. In order to maintain her growth, it needs everything from the African continent. Here, one scientific proclamation, what the late Lenin have said, with the growth of technology, he said, one day the Sahara will feed humanity, he said. With the development of human science, the technologies, which that proved now Libya have a huge amount of ocean of water.
That was what Gaddafi was trying to do. The eighth wonder, actually,
yes.
Irrigation of the desert from that underground sea.
Also, Egypt got that. The water they discovered in Egypt and Sudan until Eritrea is the same type of the water that Libya discovered. Every day and every month, with the new development of technology, every year and so on, new resources in Africa also is discovering. The development of technology brought African wealth even more. Before was an estimation, now is concrete. European. Europe,
Africa can feed the world.
Beyond the world. Even if there will be population in Mars and Jupiter and so on, Africa could export for them. So with the development of this technology, Africa's wealth is every day, every month, every year is discovered. This frightened the European imperialists. And in the sense that it is the European imperialists, like France and so on, they are extremely dependent with the phosphate, for example, when you take the most dominant country in electricity and so on, in Europe, big part of Europe is France, with the nuclear technology she uses. All the uranium is coming freely from Niger. Just to give one example, Niger is the second biggest uranium concentration in the world. So in all fields, and this frightens them. China is rising, yes. China pays for that cash. It buys of the market basis. Secondly, of course, a lot of Chinese came to Africa, and some of them even settled and became farmers in Mozambique and this and this. The other thing, now Mozambique have discovered, and will be one of the biggest exporter of gas in the world, in the Indian Ocean, which is northern
offshore oil, yeah.
Offshore gas. Offshore gas. We don't know what is in the Indian Ocean. We don't know what is in the Red Sea and so on. So all this is combined, frightens them. To come to our region now, if China have a lot of cards in her hand, that it is Germany, Germany, her first trade is not within Europe, it is with China. car industry, textile industry, machines, all are sent to China. China is...
Would you say somewhere in the range of 60% of Germany's export is to China?
Imagine. That is very huge. So, what I think to come to this the resolution, it is the new administration in the United States. When they came, these are new administration of the old Obama remnants and Clinton remnants. They ignited what they call an idea, the new liberal internationalism, to revive American hegemonism in the world. And I think in Europe, most of these elements, they were for 4 years oppressed when it is Trump was in the United States, and they backed and the campaign against Trump in Europe at that moment, the national televisions, the intelligentsia, the editorial writers, and so on, they are in favor of the Democrats. Now the Democrats came to power, and they start an aggressive thing, and this aggressive policy of them, of course, is also now with their friends in puppets in Ethiopia collapsed. They wanted to show that probably it's a pressure from United States. I mean, you really believe that the Europe where there is Malta, the Europe where there is Greece, the Europe where there is Portugal, the Europe where there is Spain, and so on. All these have discussed and agreed to make such kind of a resolution. Some of them, they don't even exist.
Highly unlikely, yeah. It was most likely pushed by
United States
bureaucrats like that man from Spain, Joseph Borrell, the high in charge of foreign affairs.
Yes, yes, Joseph Borrell. He was also Minister of Foreign Affairs of Spain. He was originally he is a Catalan, but he's a unionist in the Spain government. But also he is a right wing. But he knows that it is neither Catalonia, neither Spain are important in the eye of the United States. It is. They just call him and they whistle the blow, and then he dances for them. He knows that. So it is I don't think the real hegemon in Europe. One have to ask this question: the CEO of Mercedes-Benz, the CEO of BMW, the CEO of Bosch,
the industrialists, and
the industrialists. This one will tell us, will tell us the reality. I'm sure they are not happy. They say, no, we are not part of it. This is maybe for public relations. They are trying to attack China, but we are selling with China and we are eating from the dishes of China. Second, Burma. Burma is, since Utant, since the independence of Burma, since the Communist Party of Burma, which had been a Maoist, a relationship between Burma or Myanmar, it is very long until Chiang Kai-shek was defeated and his troops were stationed, and from there they were taken to Taiwan. So the relationship between Burma and or Myanmar and China is a very deep historical relation. So for a very long time, the biggest investors also now is People's Republic of China. The other is that the inter-Chinese contradiction, the problem of Taiwan, Hong Kong, and so on. But that is too late. The China Sea contradiction, in the Asian area, the contradiction between Philippines, Vietnam, and so on the on sea demarcation and this and this. But the US is the one engineering, and European Union, I think in the list they have put in first China, then Russia, and then Myanmar, and then probably Eritrea, Southern Sudan, and so on. It is an institution without teeth. It cannot bite. The same like European Union. Council of Ministers of Europe, it doesn't mean anything. In concrete, what they can do. In order to impose the resolution on the ground, what they can do, nothing. Because it is their uncle controlling the sea and the ocean. And probably he wrote it for them and say, if you don't accept that, then forget your ships will not come in the sea, in the Mediterranean Sea. I will rob it.
Which brings us to the Alaska summit, which happened a few days ago, 3 days ago, I think, in which from the US side was the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, and the National Security Advisor, Sullivan, I believe. And from the Chinese side, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Wang Yi, and the top man of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, Politburo member, I believe Yang Jiechi is his name, is in charge of foreign affairs. And let's see a brief analysis, and we will show also a video in which there was a heated exchange in the opening, which broke protocol. I don't know why they allowed camera, but the Chinese delegation leader blasted the United States. So let's watch that videotape. In fact, 2 short videotapes. The first one is very short, of the confrontation, and then there is a brief analysis by CGT and the Chinese television.
Today, we'll have an opportunity to discuss key priorities, both domestic and global. We'll also discuss our deep concerns with actions by China, including in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, cyber attacks on the United States.
On cyber attacks, let me say that whether it's the ability to launch cyber attacks or the technologies that could be deployed, the United States is the champion in this regard.
Secretary Blinken laid out many of the areas of concern, from economic and military coercion to assaults on basic values. These are the concerns that are on the minds of the American people. But it goes beyond that. We've heard each of these concerns from around the world.
The U.S. does not represent international public opinion.
I have to tell you, what I'm hearing is very different from what you described. I'm also hearing deep concern about some of the actions your government is taking.
A confident country is able to look hard at its own shortcomings and constantly seek to improve. And that is the secret sauce of America.
I think we thought too well of the United States. We thought you would follow the necessary diplomatic protocols. The U.S. does not have the qualification to say that it wants to speak to China from a position of strength. You were not even qualified to say such things 20 or 30 years back because this is not the way to deal with the Chinese people. If you want to deal with us properly, let's have some mutual respect and do things the right way.
Hey guys, welcome to Reality Check. I'm Wang Guan. The world has been making sense of the recent Alaska meeting between Beijing and the Biden administration. Here are a few quick thoughts here. First of all, you do see the shifting power dynamics between Beijing and Washington. This is a photo that went viral on Chinese social media. The first one was taken at the signing of Boxer Protocol in 1901, an unequal treaty China signed after it's defeated by 8 Western powers. The treaty allowed Western troops to be stationed in China and forced Beijing to pay 18,000 tons of silver, which is $10 billion in today's value. It took China 4 decades to pay it off. The second one was taken at the Alaska meeting in 2021. Yang Jiechi, China's senior official, pointed fingers, literally pointing his fingers at the US side, accusing them of condescension and hypocrisy, citing specific examples of Black Lives Matter movement, the Capitol riot, and endless American wars. He said the US has no qualification to lecture China from a position of strength. Wow. When was the last time anyone had the gut to tell a US Secretary of State that? And to tell that on live television? On Twitter, 99 Sheikh says, referring to Yang's speech, 18 minutes of hardcore truth. Ouch. Yes123 says, it was always America dictate topics between the two, now they're surprised. Global Politics put it even more bluntly, saying, basically, China told the US, you're not number one anymore. Learn to treat others like equals. Shut up about freedom, democracy, and human rights. And here's my favorite, Bruce Lee, the singular figure that challenged Western stereotypes and ignorance about Asian men. Bruce, bro, you're sorely missed. Now, a lot of people interpret China's remarks in Alaska as being aggressive and provocative, but after Trump and Pompeo going around the globe, scapegoating China for what's largely been America's own problem for 4 years, Yan's 16-minute statement looks moderate.
Okay, you saw the heated exchange of words, the words of the Chinese head of the delegation was the United States does not have any qualifications to say it's talking to China from a position of strength. Essentially, he was telling them, you're no longer a superpower, no longer the lone superpower, what Professor Charles Johnson said. So it's kind of strange also that, they're having this summit on US soil, and you would expect that, at least in public, the talks would be toned down and real substantive talks would be behind closed doors. But instead, everything backfired. What do you make of this bellicose or belligerent confrontational attitude from the United States? What is driving it?
First of all, I was the last 5-6 years following the foreign affairs of Comrade Elias. In fact, I could say the last 9 years. I was surprised. In the past, now I have stopped buying it. In the past, when I came as a young man to Europe, I liked foreign affairs because they were, yes, right-wing, anti-revolutionary theoreticians, but serious theoreticians. And you can learn something from them, whether history, how they combined all these elements, and how
the analysis was sharp, fact-based,
and so on. There is no emotion.
Ideological tilt of neoliberalism and all that.
Yes. But if you follow the this neoliberal ideology with foreign affairs the last 9 years, just it's a gutter play.
Deteriorated.
Extremely. Then I was thinking, I said, there is no ideologue. The imperialists, probably in the past, because of the Soviet Union exists and the communists and the anti-imperialist forces, they were strong and threatening them according to them. They needed from the work, from the ordinary people's son and daughters, the cleverest one have to be promoted and so on, put them in a good schools, come up and so on and become ideologue like Chalmers Johnson, like Cannon, like all others, like even Brzezinski and so on. He came from a simple working family from Polish origin. So you could see for clever kids and so on, they promote them, they educate them, they train them, and then they use them. Now, any charlatan can write an article in the foreign affairs. So the level of the foreign affairs went down. This corresponds to me, it is the major propaganda journal of them, is if dwindling to that extent and is becoming poorer and poorer. This shows there is no ideologue in the United States. There are only a bunch of drunken individuals who boost, but they cannot differentiate between a cat and an elephant. They cannot analyze. This is one serious problem. That's why Chalmers Johnson, he was attacking them in all his articles and books. He said
the 3 books, the Blowback trilogy, yes. Blowback, Sorrow of Empire, and Nemesis.
Second, I think they were psychologically, and all the training system was was in anti-Islam tendency, was xenophobic, anti-Islam. It's exactly like in 1870, 72, 1890 France, when anti-Semitism was brought up heavily and so on. Every charlatan writing book that Jews are drinking the blood of the Christian kids and so on. It is the same atmosphere I see. Very poor. In Europe also, it had always been dependent ideologically, intellectually, technologically, militarily, even financially to a certain extent with Uncle Sam. The mentality became dependent. So you don't find the big readers, writers in Germany, that it is who have at least the concept what they think of their relationship in the East, how they are going to rebuild their relationship with Russia, and so on. There is no strategical studies in Germany. So United States have suffocated them and dominated them in Germany. And even in France, they were in the time of de Gaulle and others, and when the Communist Party was a bit stronger and so forth, there was a serious debate and so on. A lot of books was published and so on. Now there is nothing. That French La Humanité, the journal of the Communist Party, is just as a gutter press became like any press in Ethiopia of 3 pages, and 90% of it is publicity, whether you like to buy a donkey or a sheep and so on. There is nothing. So the level went very, very low. And this frustrated, I think, a big segment of European intelligentsia, and they withdrew. The process of withdrawal happened in Europe. And now, such kind of sanction, they are trying to imitate the United States. Somebody from a State Department comes in the microphone and explains to the journalist, yeah, Myanmar, we did this, they don't have to have shoes. We made sanction on them in their underwears, they should not get underwear and so on, but we only allow them in trouser and so on. I mean, I'm joking now. The level of, the level.
Oh, yeah, under the guise of human rights, what have you, democracy, all kinds of nonsense, interventionism is.
And that to come, if we analyze their condition of the last 22 years, to a small country called Eritrea. I was traveling in that country for a very long time. If sanction kills a nation, Eritrea should have been killed eventually. Second, yes, sanction brought some damages. But given the situation, at that moment, unipolar is even dominant. That Eritrea could not only survive, became strong, and it defeated her enemies from whatever quarter they are.
Now, and came out now
as a winner. The
idea of new Horn of Africa, peace, cooperation in the region.
Because their understanding it is from 70s that the Eritrean revolution understanding of the Horn of Africa and independence of Eritrea, the right of self-determination of Eritrea, is linked always in all their writing is on the new Horn of Africa. Because they touched the main actor is not the one who's fighting on the ground. The main actor is the one who's subsidizing behind the ground. And that is European American imperialists. They are the ones who have refused the right of self-determination of Eritrean people from the 40s when Haile Selassie met Roosevelt in Alexandria in the ship. There was that virus was incubated and so on, and Eritrean people have to make a long journey to defeat this project. So if this project is defeated, and Eritreans defeated it, and they tried to build the new Horn of Africa, but the TPLF, because of its minority psychology and it is because of unclear, disturbed mind, that it rejected it later on, because TPLF in no way could have come to power. In no way, in all calculation. It is only the alliance of the Eritrean revolution with them, hoping that the Eritrean revolution, hoping that these people will learn and they will come out from this archaic psychology of them and they will be a normal people and deal with the region in normal situation. They hoped that. And they could not anticipate that the sickness of TPLF is so contagious and so deep in the deep, and it became even a leprosy of the mind. So when I was, one of the reasons made me to join the transitional government and so on, and to work for my country with the assumption that we are building the new Horn of Africa.
This was in the early part of 1990 when Eritrea became independent. Yes. And the EPRDF came, or TPLF came to power in Ethiopia.
Yes, but that didn't succeed because of internal enemy. And after 22 years, it came back. And that shocked them. And they could not analyze. So to use now humanitarian intervention in our region, because it is for them also is very, very important now, with all these wells which is discovering every day in Africa and those of the world exist, with the idea of a new Horn of Africa, the region becoming very strategic and important, even for the Chinese more than, because we are closer to them in a sense, geographically and everything and so on. So we don't know, we don't read Chinese, but I'm sure if we would read Chinese and we know Chinese language and so on, the Chinese strategists, what they are writing and what they are thinking, probably I assume they are thinking like me, that it is the Chinese sphere of influence and their relationship is much wider, which I mentioned last time, the four rivers combined. This is the way they are thinking. And this frightened, I think, also the European Union and probably United States, as we have said. It is very far from this region. It is an Atlantic force, and it uses this and frightening Europeans. Look, Africa is going to be out of your hand, because in the 60s, they were allowed to exploit Africa. United States was dominating the whole world. But now market is shrinking. United States also wants to dominate. To give you an example, American ambassadors in Africa, their main task is to explain to African politicians in intelligentsia, don't work with China. I was speaking to a senator.
Yeah, you mentioned that last time in the first part, the Kenyan senator.
So they are the only job of them going to every home, knocking the door and say, don't work with the Chinese. The Chinese are dangerous. They will swallow you, and so on and so on and so on.
To spread xenophobia.
Indeed, which they didn't succeed. As the senator said, you are 50 years in this country. You don't even build a small kiosk, and you are telling us that don't work with Chinese while they are building hospital and highways, building the train stations. That is rubbish. That is what is happening, Comrade Elias.
So essentially in this new Horn of Africa, despite some challenges and hurdles, the cooperation has a big chance of growing, the peace and cooperation among the three pillar nations first, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia. And slowly, hopefully, Sudan will emerge out of the current quagmire, difficult transition it is in. Since if South Sudan also emerges from the era of conflict, the prospect for the rest of Africa is also there, right? Of a new vision, the end of neo-colonialism. What needs to be done is the solidarity against injustice. Africans, how long are we going to be subservient, tools of outside forces?
I think the colonial hangover in Europe, even though it died, it still is in the wind in two things. One is that it is the arrogancy is European establishment had and the vision they had toward Africans. Because they really believed that they have dominated the new colonial states and the new colonial intelligentsia by frightening them and dominating psychologically. But what now is frightening them is that the younger generation. When you look now in France and French-speaking Africa, the young people, they want to destroy the CFA. This is the linking of the local currency with the French currency. Most of young people, songs, demonstrations, debate, and so on, to delink it. That is the only way that France can dominate and loot the resources of these colonies.
Every year it extracts nearly $14 billion with a B from Africa. 14,
1-4.
Yeah, that's a huge.
Yes, imagine. So 14 billion, that's a huge amount of money. This concept of a new Horn of Africa, it will frighten in the first basis is which have a direct link and a direct relation and direct exploitation relation with African continent. That's one. That is why Radio Asena and so on is in France. That the French intelligence who are backing that. And this Eritrean example, very dangerous for France. They don't like it. The French, they don't like it. They say this is a nasty little country who is teaching other people to be awake. So they tried all gang up against Eritrea.
To isolate it, to break it, sanction it. But
yes.
As the saying goes, they tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds.
Bravo.
Came out sprouting and blossoming.
Indeed. And the second thing I think is this resolution against Eritrea, even though I see it to have no meaning, it is a sort of psychological terrorism toward not Eritreans, but toward the region.
Psychological warfare, yeah?
Yes, psychological welfare. Because their assumption is that Ethiopia is their new colony. It had remained for a very long time like that, and so on. There is no way Ethiopia can go out of hand. We can control it with, we have a lot of hand inside there. We can control it. We can
with aid and what have you,
psychology and so on. German radio they have in Amharic and so on. They can make propaganda. The
BBC now has Tigrinya, Oromo, and Amharic.
Yes, the French VOA. The French have the lycée and all these cultural schools, secondary schools, and so on. With a lot of agents around them and this and this. So they think that they can manage Ethiopia. Multinational countries have different psychology, a lot of contradiction among themselves. They cannot think together and so on. They cannot merge or create a formula to be united and to see toward the Horn of Africa and so on. Therefore, this little country, Eritrea, is very dangerous. So we have to, the war was in Tigray. Why they have to sanction Eritrea? Eritrea have nothing to do. But they see
it's a threat of good example.
A threat of good example. That is why now you cannot call. Now they punish one man. Who have never been in Europe himself, and he's not. He doesn't know even. Maybe he saw it in a map that there is a Europe there, but I don't think he's interested in Europe. We have never been in Europe, and he will.
It's meaningless, yes.
Yes, it is cynical. But our population should understand it very well.
Yeah.
The strength always from inside. What the Chinese behaved in Alaska, it's because they are strong inside.
Inside, though, in this case, means the new Horn of Africa. That is our big home. We should think broadly, expand cooperation, defend each other. When one is attacked, we should stand by their side, show solidarity. For example, these past weeks have been very encouraging. Ethiopians and Eritreans coming together to defend their rights, their sovereignty in the streets of Washington, D.C., London, and all the major cities in Europe. Symbolically, that sends a big message. Solidarity is important.
Here is the most important is that it is our subnational contradiction is a secondary contradiction. And we should put it aside. That it is, we are the people of the Horn of Africa. Our interest, it is interlinked. Our future is interlinked. So it is, instead of thinking in subnational concept for the moment, let us think on the basis of the Horn of Africa. And this new Horn of Africa, it will be democratic. It will give the right for all subnational. We don't want Horn of Africa of one is a first-class citizen and another is a third-class citizen. That is not our plan. We want a democratic Horn of Africa, which is a progressive one, and so on. And I am appealing to my compatriot Ethiopians that the contradiction within the home, it's a secondary one. We can discuss about it. We can debate about it. But please think in a higher stage that the Horn of Africa belongs to all of us. Let us unite and let us confront the enemy, which is coming from 30, 20, 10,000 kilometers to create a division among ourselves and so on. And by that division for 8 decades, they brought a lot of harm toward us. And now we have to be awake and let's follow as the Eritreans do. They are the vanguard in the Horn of Africa. And let's work, all of us together, make sure that we doesn't want to continue in the past. Our kids, they were dying in the sea, in the desert. The misery was continuing. Every time there was a war, internal displaced and so on. What they want is from Ethiopia is that Ethiopia is getting every year between 15 to 20 million people. Ethiopians they need a handout from European Union. Ethiopia is a country which gets the highest budget support from European Union. Ethiopia is pampered. That is why they have no respect for us. And they can say whatever they want. They can spit on our faces and so on. So we have to say enough. I mean, let them keep their own money. I mean, they were giving us in one side and taking it from the other side, double and so on, including the interest rate. So we have to be very careful. Let's work together and let's think broader and see the world as Elias talked, how the world is. And then we have to try to find our places in this new economic world.
To claim our rightful place, dignity, sovereignty, and grow our economy together. Well, that was very good concluding remarks. Mohamed, we've come to the end of our show. Next week, we will continue the discussion, follow up on the events on the ground in Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia. I'd like to conclude with one very good observation, comment from Twitter, social media, by one Eritrean views in the face of this European Union belligerent stance. He says, or she says, the EU has preferred hostility to engagement. Eritrea's response: be calm, don't get distracted, redouble efforts to, 1, build Eritrea, strengthen partnership with Ethiopia, promote regional cooperation, contribute to global solidarity against injustice. And hashtag Eritrea prevails, of course, hashtag Somalia prevails, hashtag Ethiopia prevails. So we have to be calm, to redouble our efforts to expand our cooperation, to secure the peace process as was the theme of our last virtual conference, the new Horn of Africa, secure the peace process, expand cooperation. We have to be focused. We must not be distracted by this, barking dogs left and right. Redouble our efforts, remain resilient, and we will come out. We will build the new Horn of Africa, I think. What do you think?
Correct, Comrade Elias.
Okay, so with that, we come to the conclusion of this discussion, dear viewers. Please do follow us, subscribe, and share widely. Until next time, for myself and my good friend Mohamed Hassan, salam.